What's up, everybody? Matt Maran here for another weekly update. So there's lots and lots of news to go over here once again this week. There's the Paris Auto Show this week and a bunch of other little bits of news here. So before I get into the news, I first want to mention I'll be doing my usual weekly live stream on Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Join if you can. It's always a fun time hanging out and talking cars with all of you. But the biggest news here this week, the big debut of the Ferrari LaFerrari successor called the F80. First time, in over a decade, we've had a new hypercar here from Ferrari. So, in a move that's sure to upset some people, Ferrari chose their 3-liter twin-turbo V6 as the power plant here. But it still ends up being the most powerful Ferrari ever made thanks to the help of electrification, which adds 284 horsepower on top of the already very powerful V6 that incredibly does 900 horsepower on its own. This propels it to a 2.15 seconds 0 to 62 mile per hour time and a top speed of 217.5 miles per hour, which is just a half a mile per hour faster than the new McLaren W1. I almost feel like they just fudged the number there just to be like, we are better. That sounds like a Ferrari move. But it does do a much lower 0 to 60 time compared to the McLaren's 2.7. Hilariously, though, while we're talking about bragging rights, this week Chevy also announced that the new Corvette ZR1 hit a top speed of 233 miles per hour. Blowing all those fancy hypercars out of the water, which is really impressive and embarrassed basically everyone outside of Bugatti and Koenigsegg. So kudos to Team Corvette. Very well timed as well with all these hypercars coming out. But anyway, back to the Ferrari. The V6 is pretty extensively modified compared to the one in the 296 with various tweaks to things like the ignition and combustion chamber pressure and a red line of 9,000 RPM. It runs an 8-speed dual clutch transmission that does have all-wheel drive thanks to 2 electric motors up front along with another one in the rear, all built in-house, and this all-wheel drive is likely the main reason why this is so much faster to accelerate, of course, than that rear-wheel drive W1. This all-wheel drive system also allows for torque vectoring, but unlike other electrified supercars, there's no electric mode in the F80, but it does have a 2.3 kilowatt-hour battery that gets topped off by the engine. It also works with a boost optimization feature that will analyze a track after you've done one lap and then figure out where it can give you extra boost and automatically deploy that boost appropriately, which is pretty cool. To slow all this power down, you now have new Brembo CCM-R Plus brakes that have advanced carbon fibers for much better strength and cooling. There's also an active suspension with spool valve dampers from Multimatic that make anti-roll bars unnecessary. And it's a really advanced suspension setup, supposedly. It all goes to the ground through Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 or 2R tires that are 285 in the front and 345 in the rear. Dry weight is just 3,362 pounds, which is a little more than the rear-wheel drive only McLaren, but not much more despite all that extra stuff with the all-wheel drive components and all that. And so part of that is thanks to the roof on the Ferrari being completely made of carbon fiber. There is aluminum front and rear subframes and an asymmetrical monocoque chassis that's made of carbon fiber and composites and allows the driver's seat to adjust, unlike the W1, and even the old LaFerrari had a fixed seating position. So it allows it to adjust, but the passenger seat remains fixed. So interesting little switch. They kind of call this car a 1 Plus. Like the passenger is an afterthought, and that's about it. But despite this, it still is almost 2 inches lower than the LaFerrari as well. So really impressive with the way they packaged that monocoque. And so the rest of the design has some elements inspired by the Daytona and the F40, and it all works together along with active aero to produce 2,204 pounds of downforce at 155 miles per hour. And it takes the McLaren 174 miles per hour to generate the same downforce. So Ferrari doing it a lot sooner and, should have a handling advantage as a result. And while in some ways this may be superior to that McLaren, the McLaren is the clear winner on price and on rarity, surprisingly. With McLaren only making $399 of their car at a price of $2.1 million, and the Ferrari costing about double, about $4 million for this thing at current conversion rates. Also, I believe the most expensive new Ferrari, at least as far as, non-one-off commission things. And so they're also making a more numerous 799 of these, which is actually an impressive amount. That's a lot of cars for something that's as high-end as this. And they'll be built between the end of 2025 up through 2027. So now all we need is Porsche to come out with a hypercar, which has been rumored, and then we can reignite those comparisons from 2013 of, the 918, the LaFerrari, and the P1. And so far, let me know in the comments which you would take, the McLaren or the Ferrari here. And speaking of Porsche, though, the new GT3 will be debuting here today on Friday. So it'll be after this is filmed, unfortunately, so I'm going to miss it. I'll cover that next week, and I'll talk about, of course, in the live stream here on Sunday night as well. But yes, I am aware of the GT3. I just, again, didn't get it in time here. But hilariously, another car that'll be even rarer than both of those hypercars is the new Subaru WRX Todoroki edition, I think is how you say it. And yes, Subaru is getting even bolder with the trolling here for those who desperately want an STI, because they even put an STI wing on this vehicle, which essentially seems to be like a WRX TR, just with a rear wing, honestly. And the tease is limited to just New Zealand, though, and only just 10 cars. Amazingly, this is apparently the only WRX in New Zealand that's currently sold new with a manual transmission. They're all automatic in New Zealand, which is a real shame. My sympathy goes out to the New Zealanders out there that don't have manual WRXs here. But anyway, other than the wing, yeah, like I said, just gets the TR wheels, brakes, Recaros, nothing really special, honestly. But Subaru is now putting an STI wing on a WRX from the factory. Inching ever so closer to that, final STI that hopefully they will make someday. We'll have to wait and see. But anyway, very interesting to hear that. And there's some better news, though, for enthusiasts that I'll talk about in a minute. But first, I have to cover Nissan's big debut here. They finally introduced a new generation of the Murano after nearly 10 years of the old one. So as you can see, it gets some styling inspired by the Aria up front, and there's some Infiniti inspiration in the rear. Although I also see a little bit of Hyundai Tucson inspiration at that front end as well. But compared to the old Murano, it's 2.6 inches wider and has almost 2 more inches of ground clearance, but the wheelbase is identical to the old one, and the length and the height are almost identical as well, which makes me think this is a heavy refresh. There's a lot that's changed here, but just kind of surprising the wheelbase hasn't changed, because this means you shouldn't expect it to be any roomier, sadly. Supposedly, according to the measurements they provided, it actually has less rear legroom now due to them prioritizing front row legroom, which is up slightly. So yeah, I mean, I can understand if, this is a vehicle that primarily is driven by people who just sit up front, and it doesn't, if their data suggests people don't sit in the back of Muranos very often, this move could make sense, but it just doesn't look very good because the Murano has over 2 inches less rear legroom than the Rogue. So you're getting a mid-sized SUV that has less space inside than the compact SUV. Just seems like inefficient packaging, and again, really suggests to me that this is, again, still has some dated bones to it. Otherwise, they surely would have made it larger, I think, if they were, starting from a clean slate. So, to me, it's not that much of an upgrade, at least as far as spacing goes. It's also, not much of an upgrade mechanically here either compared to the Rogue. Dropping the V6 for the 2-liter turbo 4 with variable compression that does just 241 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque, which is 19 less horsepower than that old V6. But it is 20 more pound-feet of torque, and that combined with the turbo having boost down low, this should feel punchier off the line than that old V6. But just again, on paper, doesn't look great to be losing horsepower, and again, was from a dated V6 as well, so it should have been a very low bar, to surpass, and they, haven't done it here. So that's a little bit unfortunate. It will also feel a little better, though, whenever you are accelerating, thanks to them throwing out the CVT, which I think is going to be the most exciting thing for a lot of people, at least as far as internet commenters go, since they can't stop talking about Nissan CVTs. So threw that out, and it's been replaced with a 9-speed automatic, which I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming this is the ZF 9-speed, which is one of the worst 9-speeds currently. It's not great. It's not as good as the ZF 8-speed, sadly. Not sure why they went for the 9-speed. It should be fine for a vehicle like this, but, I know there's been some complaints about it in the Honda Pilot and Passport and some others. So, anyway, that's what they decided to go with. Front-wheel drive is still standard on these. All-wheel drive is an option once again. And inside it gets some Aria inspiration as well, and is a huge upgrade from the old Murano, especially here, aside from having that tighter back seat. So there's double 12.3-inch screens as standard and haptic buttons to change basic functions there in the middle. Head-up display is also available, and you can now get the 3D surround view camera, along with other tech like a ProPilot Assist 1.1 and even massaging seats. So, really moving it up market there a little bit. And it'll go on sale early next year, but there's no pricing for these yet. It's also surprising it only gets ProPilot Assist 1.1, considering some of the newest stuff is getting the 2 version, which is hands-free. It's kind of strange it doesn't get that, but anyway, yeah, interesting to see that. And so getting back to some enthusiast news here. So we've been hearing rumors, over the past year especially, that the Toyota Supra could be done by 2026, just like the BMW Z4. BMW said that's when production will be ending of that. And so, everyone assumes they're built alongside each other using similar components in many ways, so they will go away at the same time as well. And that would make sense, and that still might be the case, but in an interesting interview that Car Expert did this week, Toyota Australia's Vice President of Marketing and Sales surprisingly revealed that there is no plan to discontinue the Supra brand in this car company. I know that. BMW is not Toyota. The notion that Supra is stopping is purely speculative. So the key word here, he worded this very carefully, I think, because he said that the Supra brand is not going to be discontinued. The brand. I think he kind of missed the point of the question because we're talking about this current Supra. But to me, this confirms that the Supra will continue on in some form. But, still, again, leaves the door open for this current one going away in 2026. Yes, he also added, though, that the Supra might change. It might morph shape-wise. And that is a terrifying statement. Because after, the years of being scarred by the Mustang Mach-E and by the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross and, even the Ford Capri recently over in Europe, them saying that the Supra will change, I don't think is what anyone wants to hear. Everyone wants it to be a 2-door sports car, nothing else. And so we will see how this plays out, but that was a real bombshell to hear that. And so I'm sure everyone's alarms are going off out there in YouTube world as well. But so as far as going off into the speculation once again, as far as what this could mean, there's a few different options in my mind. So first off, there is historical precedent of them using, having a family of Supras, or at least, having the Supra name become a performance thing. Because, previously there was the Celica Supra way back in, the 70s and the 80s, and that was the fast version of the Celica. We have heard that Celica is coming back. Maybe they can't justify a dedicated Supra, so maybe there will be Celica, and then there will be Celica Supra. And maybe they will do that. I assume these days they would just, do a GR Celica, since, that's kind of how they denote performance variants. And I think changing Supra into, being some type of tuning arm or something wouldn't really make much sense. But there's that, because again, we do have historical precedent of that. And then another theory that might not hold up quite as well either, but there's the idea about the FTSE concept that we saw last year in Tokyo, that could actually be the new Supra. And the FTSE designer himself, he discouraged suggestions that the car was the new MR2, because that was the natural inclination. It looked like a mid-engine car, even though it was electric. But it was just like, well, this could be the new MR2. But we've heard other rumors that a new MR2 is going to be low cost, cheap, and much slower. Just using a regular gas engine, and a small one at that, and possibly being only for Japan if it's really small. So, so if he shot down the idea of it being an MR2. He also, though, apparently told Inside EVs back last year, when that came out, that this is a brand new design language to show this is a new brand. And so he also pushed back on the idea of it getting the Supra name as well. But that was a year ago. Things could change. We will see. But to me, this concept being a high-tech, expensive new car that's supposed to come out in the late 2020s, because supposedly the platform it shares some battery tech with the new Lexus that's supposed to be coming out in 2026, and they said this will be sometime after that. 2026 is when Supra's going away. Conceivably, this could come on the scene around 2027, right when a new Supra would be expected. And also, it would fit with, this quote this Australian executive said about the Supra morphing. And obviously, we could all go to worst-case scenarios of them making some bloated Supra SUV or turning into some, lifted crossover or something. But this would be a much better, ideal situation if we are going to have to morph the Supra. Turning it into the FTSE concept, I think, would be, an okay compromise. Although I still think, front engine, rear-wheel drive, long hood, traditional proportions are just what everyone wants. And I think Toyota has a pretty good idea of what the enthusiasts do want, and I think they do a pretty good job of listening to enthusiasts. So I would hope that they wouldn't, throw out the goodwill that they've generated over the past, 5 years or so here with the new Supra, and that, something coming will be a regular two-door coupe, but we will see. But yeah, let me know what you think about that quote in the comments below, though, about it morphing. Definitely has me a little bit concerned. But moving on here, Stellantis is in the news once again this week. It's really the hot media topic here, is all this Stellantis stuff. So first, late last week, the bombshell dropped that Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares will in fact be leaving and actually retiring altogether, but leaving the company after his contract expires in January of 2026. So he still has a little over a year here, and his successor will be named closer to then. So we don't have anyone in mind just yet, but they're just, I guess, all agreed that he needs to go out, or maybe he decided that on his own. I don't know. But in the meantime, there's some other management changes here as well. The main ones being the demotion of the CEOs of Maserati and Alfa Romeo. Both of those are taking lower positions elsewhere in the company, and kind of shocking to see, a shakeup that includes a demotion instead of an outright firing. But it really shows they're serious, especially at Maserati and Alfa Romeo. So one man will be replacing both of those CEOs, named Santo Fisili, and he previously was the manager for the entire Stellantis group in Italy. So I guess they figured, pick the guy who is most familiar with the Italian market in particular, get those brands back to their Italianness that I guess, maybe might be a little bit lacking, or just, what makes them, a little more unique. And I'll talk more about Alfa Romeo and, their future here in a minute. But the other change is that Jeep's North American COO is being demoted as well. And Jeep's CEO will be adding on the job of COO as well, which sounds like a disaster. Like, Jeep is struggling. There's an argument to be made that maybe their CEO also, could benefit, leaving the company and going somewhere else, or doing, something else within Stellantis and bringing in a new CEO for Jeep. But instead, they're going to give him double the workload. He's going to be COO and CEO. So splitting his time. Splendid. Sounds like Jeep's on a great path to success. I mean, again, I'm on the outside looking in here, being armchair executive over here, but I don't know. I haven't heard of something like this really happening very often. Maybe this is common in the business world, but this just sounds kind of insane when a company is struggling to then make the CEO do double duty. It seems like it could only make things worse. So I don't know. Anyway, that is the deal right now. Stellantis, call me if you want some help. I'm happy to consult. And no, but I don't know. It's really some strange decisions there at Stellantis, but at least, with Tavares leaving, hopefully that puts them on a good path here, and hopefully this new guy comes in and helps out Maserati Alfa Romeo. But again, same deal. We had two people doing two very, demanding jobs, I'm sure, and now we have one person running both companies. Maybe there will be some synergies there and some, streamlining as a result of that, but it honestly just sounds like, we're talking about like middle management stuff of just like replacing employees and making the current employees do double the workload like you see in many other, corporate environments. And why we're seeing this in the top executive rungs of Stellantis, just to me shows that they just really don't have a very good financial footing if, they're trying to save money combining jobs and stuff. So we will see how that plays out for them, but interesting to hear that. But moving beyond the management shakeups here at Stellantis, it sounds like all the Stellantis brands might also get a shakeup sooner than originally planned. So initially, back in 2021, I've covered this a couple of times this year, Stellantis said all their brands have 10 years to prove themselves, so 2031 was the earliest we would see any brands go away. And this was reconfirmed recently, just a couple of months ago, and Stellantis, whenever there was talk about, maybe Maserati getting sold off and some other stuff, interestingly, the CFO of Maserati, who said that they are considering maybe rehoming Maserati somewhere else, she is now leaving the company. So it sounds like there's a real good documentary in the making here behind the scenes, but that may actually be pretty close to the truth, and she might have lost her job over it, sadly. We will see. I mean, again, I'm completely speculating here, but it's very interesting that the person that let the supposed cat out of the bag or speculated out of turn that, Maserati could be sold off is now leaving Maserati. So, again, make of that what you will. But anyway, getting back to the shakeup of brands. At the Paris Motor Show this week, Tavares, the CEO, confirmed and told to Automotive News that all the brands are fully financed through 2026. Fully financed. So, I guess there still could be some type of wild card that makes them go away even though they are fully financed. But essentially, this means that any clickbait story you see out there or any stupid YouTube video you see saying everyone's going bankrupt and all this stupid crap, that's all BS. They're fully financed through 2026. Nothing is going away until beyond 2026. 2027, January 1st, 2027, fair game. We'll see what happens. But anything that you see between now and then about anyone going bankrupt within Stellantis, it's not happening. They're fully financed, he says. End of story. I know there's so much crappy clickbait out there in the car news world these days. So many stupid thumbnails I see myself and BS videos. I don't know why people keep watching them and they get massive views. It's all a load of crap. So please refer people to this channel if they actually want real car news here. But anyway, getting back here to Tavares, he did say that decisions about each brand's fate will be made 2 to 3 years from now. So, again, once they are not fully financed, or if they're considering that over the next couple of years here, whether to fully finance them beyond 2026, those decisions will be made 2 to 3 years from now. So again, overriding the Stellantis official line that everything's safe till 2031. Now it sounds like 2027 is when we could see some brands go away or consolidate or get shifted around or something sold off, whatever. So, still with some potential for some brands to go away, but again, we still got a couple of years till that happens. And so, you can go out and break out all the different brands, and we can speculate here as far as which ones this will be, bad for. But I think the main one is Chrysler. This especially doesn't look good for Chrysler because, they're supposed to have their first mainstream EV crossover coming out next year. There's supposed to be a Pacifica refresh. But in the next 2 to 3 years, it sounds like that's about all they have. They are saying they're going to do like a product blitz. They're planning for the late 2020s here. But if we're going to be deciding about the fate of them by 2027, if that first, new Chrysler doesn't do super well here right out of the gate in 2025, I could see Chrysler, getting the axe here again, especially because of how there's nothing really to lose aside from the Pacifica, which could easily be shifted into the Dodge brand and made a Caravan again if they really wanted to. So there's really nothing keeping Chrysler there. So, it could mean the end of Chrysler. And I know there's been talk about Chrysler, the grandson of the Chrysler founder or whatever. He wants to buy the brand back. I have no clue, how deep that guy's pockets are, but, maybe Chrysler would be open to being for sale here in a few years, and maybe he could buy it and do whatever he wants with it. That may be on the table, again, if he actually has some money. But it also sounds like it could be do or die for Alfa Romeo as well, with a new Stelvio confirmed for 2025, a new Giulia confirmed for 2026, along with a large SUV planned for North America in 2027. So it sounds like, it is a little safer, and I think especially coming from the European perspective of Stellantis, they're not sentimental about Chrysler. So, they're not going to care about knocking off Chrysler. But I think there's more emotional attachment for Alfa Romeo for them. And it is a premium brand, so there's always the hope and the dreams of there being better margins, for a premium brand like that. I guess you could argue the same for Chrysler, but not nearly as much. But, so I think it could be, at least for Alfa Romeo in the United States here, if Stelvio doesn't do fantastic next year, if Giulia doesn't do fantastic the year after that, then I think it's going to be the end for them, because I think they're really banking on Tonale to change the fortunes of Alfa Romeo, and that is selling terribly as well. There's rumors we might get that Junior, which is the even smaller thing than the Tonale, that could come over here. I don't think that's going to really move the needle either. So again, I think that Stelvio, if that doesn't, kill it next year, Stellantis will be thinking long and hard about at least getting rid of them from the United States, but, maybe even altogether. So we will see, other stuff, the Opel and Vauxhall, I could see them easily, getting nixed or combined into one thing. Peugeot's DS Automobiles, that could, that whole spinoff they've been doing, that could be folded back into Peugeot, of course. And I know there are some strong sellers in Opel and Vauxhall elsewhere. You know, I think the UK, they have one of the best sellers with the Vauxhall Corsa and stuff. So I don't think they'll go away completely, but again, I think they could definitely combine those two brands somehow. But we'll see what happens and what they decide. And again, a lot of the stuff we're looking at it from a logical point of view. Seems like a lot of things at Stellantis right now don't make a ton of sense. So, you know, I'd say anything is fair game as far as what they decide to do. So we shall see, but very interesting to hear all that. One thing, though, that might help Alfa's fortunes is their plans to debut only EVs, you know, that may be flexing a little bit. And it sounds like they're planning to do exactly that pivot. So the outgoing CEO of Alfa Romeo apparently still attended the Paris Motor Show. I'm not sure how quickly he's leaving, you know, for his new position or whatever. But he confirmed to Auto Express at this Paris Motor Show that the new CEO has the flex to do powertrains other than EVs for the new Stelvio and Giulia if the EV versions don't sell well enough. And, you know, again, especially since they need that win, I mean, it's going to probably be the same as the Charger. I would hope they would recognize pretty early on here, like, look, we got to launch with the gas one shortly after the EV, if not at the same time. But it sounds like they're maybe doing a wait and see thing of like, let's put out the EV version first. And if that doesn't do well, then we'll do a gas one in a couple of years. But I don't think they have that luxury of time. So I hope they move quickly and just automatically roll these out, you know, as fast as possible. But so this is all, of course, thanks to the STLA large platform that's also being used for the Charger. And so, you know, I'm not sure if they'd stick to the same engines. You know, I'm sure there's flexibility as far as what engines they use as well. But even if they wanted to put the low trim version of the Hurricane 6 motor in, that still does 420 horsepower, turbo inline 6. You know, if Alfa does some tuning to it to make it a little bit more, you know, unique for their vehicles, that could be a really great, you know, powertrain for a next-gen Stelvio and Giulia. So we will see. I think, yeah, definitely pivoting into gas right now, especially for a brand that's do or die and doesn't have the, you know, money to, you know, experiment and play around. I think this is, you know, a good way to go. Just offering something for everybody. Can't hurt. But moving on here, the CEO of BMW was also talking at the Paris Motor Show about wanting to stick with gas a little bit longer here, telling Reuters that he's concerned about the viability here of car companies if the EU sticks to their 2035 new car gas ban, especially now with strained relationships. He's talking about, you know, basically every country, you know, has these strained relationships with China now, trying to keep the Chinese cars out, but also needing the battery packs that, you know, are mostly supplied in many ways from China. Again, there's some that come from elsewhere, but, you know, it just makes it a little bit tough. And so he says, a correction of the 100% BEV target for 2035 as part of a comprehensive CO2 reduction package would also afford OEMs less reliance on China for batteries, and also said that to maintain this successful course, a strictly technology agnostic path within the policy framework is essential. So my interpretation of this is that he essentially just wants the EU to adopt the same CO2 reduction strategy as Toyota, essentially offering customers whatever and letting customers just choose what's best for them. You know, and that's great. It's just, you know, again, we do have goals and targets for CO2 reduction. So it's just trying to balance the two of like letting people do whatever they want, which will most likely for a lot of people be stay with the same old, which doesn't help things. But then, you know, again, trying to rush into an all, you know, EV thing in 2035 is also probably a little bit too extreme the other way in many cases. And so, you know, I think he wants people to, or he wants the EU to recognize that even if people just, you know, go for a hybrid or something, that's still an improvement in CO2. You know, if a lot of these people are going to be skeptical of EVs for a long time, or if it just won't fit their lifestyle or what they need for a long time, you know, that's, you know, reasons why he wishes there's a little bit of wiggle room here, it sounds like. And so it is surprising, though, to hear this from, you know, him, considering that BMW is on the verge of debuting their new class EV platform, which is supposed to be really impressive, have a lot of great advancements. They're continuing their battery research, which they themselves have said is going to, you know, improve things a lot as well in just the next couple of years. And even just last week, Goldman Sachs said that they expect EV battery prices to fall by almost 50% by just 2026 due to battery innovations and falling material prices, which is stuff that we've been saying, you know, all along, or at least I have, you know, that, you know, this is stuff that's going to be, you know, getting better every single year and improving and getting cheaper and, you know, making all this a lot better. And so according to Goldman Sachs, essentially will be at cost parity with gas by as soon as 2026 or thereabouts. So really bringing down the price of all those EVs and making it less of a premium or no premium at all, and just a choice of, what fits you better and not being dependent on price. And so they believe 2026 is when we will see a new wave of EV adoption, which is, right when most of these companies are getting ready to roll out their next gen EVs. A bunch of Toyota EVs are coming in 2026. The Subaru one's coming in 2026. There's a bunch of stuff. I think that's when we're going to be getting, hopefully, the Ford small affordable thing, the new Chevy Bolt, all these new things coming right around then. So we're going to have a bunch of new product that's second gen or next gen EV tech, and some really impressive products, hopefully. So this certainly makes sense to me as well. I think Goldman Sachs is right on the money here. And, it might not grow fast enough to hit the EU's feasibility of having everything be totally electric by 2035, but if consumer adoption does pick up again in 2026, that still gives them about 9 or 8 years until you get up to that 2035 ban. And that's if we have fast growth over those 8 or 9 years, I mean, we probably won't be ready for 100%, but could be pretty close to that. So I think to me, I think the best way forward is, to have the EU allow advanced plug-in hybrids with real large amounts of electric range, but just, people who need that gas backup, who live far away from charging stations, or if amazingly in 10 years they still don't have enough chargers around them, then that could be something, that could work for those types of people. And that's what California is doing. Their 2035 goal says, we are going to be all electric by 2035, but that also includes an important loophole there for, I think, plug-in hybrids that have over, I believe it's 80 to 120 miles of range. I don't remember exactly, but, a large amount of electric range. Those will be okay still for people who, again, still just, want to have that gas backup, and I think that that's probably the way that makes the most sense. I think, if you are still trying to be pretty aggressive with that CO2 reduction. Now, right now, the only loophole in the EU law is for e-fuels. So the only hope right now to sidestep the electrics, in 2035 is just with the e-fuels, which really only makes sense for the sports cars, the hypercars and stuff like that. We will see if e-fuels advance enough in the next 10 years to make them commercially viable, and comparable to, gas prices. But I think it's not going to be, it's still going to be a price premium. So we'll see how it all plays out. But anyway, bottom line to me, these BMW executive comments to me sound a little short-sighted and kind of surprising, considering, again, they themselves have a lot of stuff coming out here in the next couple of years that should improve this whole situation a little bit. But just my humble opinion on the whole idea, and we will move on here. But kind of ironically, while complaining about company viability, BMW also confirmed that they will be building the Skycap, which is the M8 convertible with new bodywork, essentially. Only 50 of them will be made, but they're rumored to be selling for about 500,000 euros each. For a vehicle that, sells for like 150,000 euros or something like that. It's a nice markup there. So poor BMW not making any money at all. And they're, churning out these things. And apparently they're all sold out, by the way, too. So, you got people chomping at the bit for a fancy M8 for 500,000 euros. I think BMW is going to be just fine financially, in my, again, outsider idiot opinion here. But for something more affordable from BMW, they revealed the second gen of the 2 Series Gran Coupe in Paris. So it continues to be a front-wheel drive based car, with all-wheel drive being optional and powertrains being shared with Mini once again. So it's 0.7 inches longer and 1 inch taller, but width and wheelbase remain the same, interestingly. Another car like the Murano that needed to grow and didn't. It looks better than the last one, at least, even if it is just as cramped as the last one was. But even if you don't have a lot of space, you will have lots of tech, of course, getting upgraded to the new screens and the other new BMW interior touches. You get a lot of standard stuff, though, including standard heated seats and even a standard adaptive suspension, surprisingly. There's even massaging seats available as an option now, so they're really moving it up market here. And mechanically, it starts with a front-wheel drive 228S drive that's $40,775, then goes up $2,000 if you want all-wheel drive. And those ones run a 241 horsepower version of a Turbo 4, while the M235i has a 4-cylinder as well, and that one does 312 horsepower. But both do the same 295 pound-feet of torque, which is a good jump for the base car there, but is actually a downgrade here for the M235 of 37 pound-feet. But it still ends up doing a 0.2 second faster 0 to 60 time, now at 5.8 seconds for the 228X drive and 4.7 seconds for the M235. 2025. All 2 Series Grand Coupes toss out the 8-speed automatic for a 7-speed dual clutch instead, which means stop-and-go driving might be less smooth than the old car, but it will be sportier. Kind of an interesting choice, kind of a downgrade in my mind, but the Switch does allow them to integrate an M Sport boost mode on cars with the M Sport package that gives you maximum acceleration when you pull the left paddle for a second. And these top M235 versions start at $50,675 now, and they'll begin arriving at U.S. dealers in March. So good to see them keeping it around again. You know, it's nice to see small cars still, even if they aren't the best with the packaging. But Mini also has 2 debuts of their own in Paris here. The electric John Cooper Works version of the Aceman and the Cooper. So they share the same platform, so all the upgrades here I mentioned are the same. So they do 255 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque, and in the smaller Cooper, it means a 5.9 second 0 to 62 mile per hour time. It's 6.4 for the Aceman. They also have a go-kart mode that gives you 27 more horsepower for temporary periods. And while you're taking it easy, Mini claims 231 miles of range for the Cooper and 221 miles of range for the Aceman on, again, the easier WLTP test cycle. They also get unique suspension setups and sportier tires, of course. And then there's also a John Cooper Works appearance package if you want just the looks and don't need the extra performance, but it's like identical. So it's kind of confusing and hard to tell, you know, which one is which. But for those in Europe, production begins soon, but here in the US, we won't be getting any of these electric Minis until the Mini UK factory starts building all of these in 2026. Until then, they will stay away from our shores due to being built in China, and of course those Chinese tariffs on EVs, keeping them out. And some other small European car news. Mercedes has shown off the next generation of the CLA with some interesting camo on it here. It looks like, styling is going to be a little more evolutionary than the concept from last year suggested, which was a little more radical, but it still looks like it's going to be a sharp little car though, like it always has been. And the powertrains will be a big departure from the norm here though, because this one's got a blocked off grille, and the lack of exhaust tips also suggest that we're looking at an electric version of this vehicle. And the platform though will supposedly support gas versions as well. And so there's no info on when we'll get the full reveal for this, but with the 2025 model year CLA already out, this will definitely be a 2026. So we have a little bit of time here. Maybe we'll get something towards the end of the year or early next. But Alpine this week has revealed a new hardcore version of the A110 called the A110R Ultime. And it looks cool, but it comes with a very high cost of about quadruple the price of a regular A110, starting at $290,000 and can go up to about $360,000 if you want the cool paint job you see here. They're not selling these in the States, but that's just, the conversion here compared to the euro. But so yes, does 4 times the price get you 4 times the horsepower? Nope. It continues to use the 1.8 liter turbo 4-cylinder that does 345 horsepower now and 309 pound-feet of torque, which is 49 horsepower and 58 more pound-feet of torque than the regular A110R. But that car is already a car that people thought was too expensive, coming in around 100,000 euros already. And it's light, so it actually has a pretty impressive 0 to 60 time for its relatively meager power, doing a 3.8 second 0 to 62 mile per hour time. And it does have a unique gearbox. This strangely loses a gear, going down to a 6-speed, but it's still auto only. There's also Öhlins dampers, bigger AP racing brakes, forged wheels, and a titanium exhaust, plus the unique styling. But none of that is worth a big price jump for a vehicle that I think is actually the most expensive 4-cylinder vehicle you could buy, or in history in general. I don't know what they're thinking. They're only making 110 of the regular ones, and then just 15 of the ones with the unique paint job. But I honestly doubt even that many people are going to pay this much money for this Alpine. It's silly money. Even in Europe, that can buy you a very nice real supercar, or some other impressive track day special. And so I don't know. That's an interesting one. And I guess Alpine maybe wanted to just give everyone a good laugh at the Paris Motor Show, because I don't know how you could take this thing seriously at that price point. But anyway, interesting to see that. But Alpine did have another debut here at the Paris Motor Show that we can take a little more seriously here. This one called the A390 Beta. And it's a concept that previews a production vehicle coming next year. And they call it a sport fastback instead of a coupe SUV. And it looks almost like Alpine's version of the Toyota Crown, honestly. Obviously a lot better looking, I think, and a little cooler. But Alpine says the production one will have about 85% of that same exterior styling you see here. And while Alpine has said that they plan to bring 2 SUVs to the US in the next few years. Sadly, they'll be bigger than this one. And as far as this one goes, though, there's no mechanical details other than them saying that it'll have 3 electric motors, 2 of those in the back for a rear biased experience. And, a cool vehicle. Again, more forbidden fruit here for us, unfortunately. And moving on here, there's also some more frustratingly forbidden fruit that we don't get here in the US. So Renault has revealed the Renault 4 E-Tech, which is the rebirth of a car that sold over 8 million units over its 30-year run. So it runs the same platform and electric power as the equally cool Renault 5 that's also been reborn, but this one is even more retro looking with round headlights and taillights that are basically a modern take on that old design. And it even has the hatch that runs all the way down to include the rear bumper to make loading and unloading extra easy. I think they said the opening is only like 2 feet off the ground. And yeah, it's really cool. This one is a little bigger and more spacious than the 5 as well. So a little more usable, and it gets a more rugged look here as well as an option for a cool sliding fabric top, just like the old one. And so inside is also very cool as well, with more delightful retro touches, and it should handle pretty well for a little car too, even having a multi-link rear suspension, which is a rarity in this segment in Europe. And the lightest version only weighs 3,108 pounds as well, so also impressive for an EV. You'll want to use that handling to your advantage though, because these are not hot hatches. So the base one does 121 horsepower and 166 pound-feet of torque, and the faster one does 148 horsepower and 181 pound-feet of torque. And that one does a 0 to 62 mile per hour time in under 8.5 seconds. But 2 batteries are available as well. There's a 40 kilowatt hour and a 52 kilowatt hour pack. The smaller one doing 186 miles of range on the WLTP cycle, and the bigger one doing 249 miles. And it peaks at a 100 kilowatt DC fast charging rate. It'll go on sale in Europe next year, and I don't think we have any pricing yet, but so cool to see that come back. And I'm assuming hopefully it'll be priced, pretty well, and hopefully that gets a lot of people excited over there. I'm very jealous we don't get that here in the States, along with the Renault 5. Both of those would be super cool. But anyway, another very envy-inducing car that debuted this week was the Aston Martin DB12 Goldfinger edition. And many of you know I'm a sucker for movie tie-ins, and James Bond is one of my favorite movie franchises. And so this one is definitely being added to my dream car garage. But anyway, so it celebrates 60 years since the James Bond movie Goldfinger was released, which featured the first appearance of a 007 in an Aston Martin. So mechanically, it's all the same, and this is essentially just a custom build by Aston's Q division, although 60 of these will be made this time, so it's not just like a one-off. They're actually doing, a decent amount of them. But on the outside, it's painted the proper silver birch color from the old DB5, along with unique wheels that are, inspired by the old ones, and gold side strakes. Inside, they really take that gold theme literally, with actual 18-karat gold plating replacing all the metal inside. It also is even woven into the carbon fiber trim, and the shifter even has a new design to mimic the tracking device used in the movie, which is a really fun little touch. They did that. There's also an 8 of Hearts logo embroidered onto the sun visor as a nod to that scene in the movie, and the seats are even fluted in the same style as in the DB5, with a perforation pattern that's the same as the one on Bond's suit in the movie, and that perforation is done also on the headliner and the door cards. And there's a few other little things you get, like a unique car cover, and there's no pricing shared, but whatever the price is, I desperately want one of these. That is just too cool. And again, movie tie-in is my kryptonite, and so I don't know if they're even sending any of these to the US. Again, only 60 are being made, and I'm sure they will be very expensive, but whew, man, oh man. That is very, very cool. And moving on here to something much less exciting. Audi has revealed the Sportback version of the Q6 e-tron. So I'll be brief with this one, because as you'd expect, it's all the same as a regular Q6 e-tron that debuted a few months ago. It shares a platform with the new electric Porsche Macan. For this one, the roof line's lowered almost 1.5 inches for the sportier look you see. But otherwise, again, all carryover. For the US, that means the regular version does 456 peak horsepower and 300 miles of estimated range. The SQ6 doing 509 peak horsepower. Audi says it'll arrive in the US sometime next spring or summer, but there's no pricing revealed for that yet. And for another minor update here, Mercedes-AMG has bumped up the power of the C43 and the SL43 for the 2025 model year. So the 2-liter Turbo 4 now gets 14 more horsepower in the C43 and 42 more horsepower in the SL43. So both now do 416 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. And amazingly, for the C43, that minor increase drops the 0 to 60 time by a whole 0.3 seconds, which is actually a large chunk of time for just 14 horsepower. Now down to 4.3 seconds for the acceleration of that one. The other little Mercedes update here is that the E-Class is now finally available with rear-wheel drive again for those who don't need all-wheel drive, and that gives you a discount of $2,500 over the all-wheel drive base model, starting at $63,600 now, but that still is over $4,000 more expensive than a comparable rear-wheel drive BMW 530i. So still a little bit of a premium, but at least closes the gap there a little bit on starting price, and that's good to see. And for the last news story here this week, I know I'm a week late to this, but I just wanted to mention, the Tesla, revealed their Cybercab and Robovan. And the Cybercab is their long-awaited, fully autonomous car that has no steering wheel, no pedals, and just 2 seats. And it also has no charge port, with Tesla planning to charge these exclusively through inductive charging, they say, which seems like something that's a long ways off from being viable on any large scale. So I'm not sure how they plan to properly support these little things, considering they're claiming it'll go into production in 2026. I mean, we can't even get regular charging stations, up fast enough. And then, now we're talking about inductive charging, maybe at home or maybe at a hub. But outside of that, forget it. So you're basically not going to be able to charge these things at superchargers, again, unless there's some radical, gigantic investment happening for superchargers here in the next 2 years or less. And also they say this is going to cost under $30,000, supposedly, whenever it goes on sale in 2026. So, again, we will see how that all plays out. But the other one here was the Robovan, which was a big surprise I don't think anyone was expecting, and it truly looked like something out of a vintage sci-fi movie. And all they say about that is it's also autonomous and can transport large amounts of people or goods. And to round out the sci-fi theme, they also revealed their Tesla bot that they say is designed to help with chores and errands, and they were hanging out at the event, apparently like mixing drinks and stuff and doing a few other tasks. And it's all very interesting, typical fashion. We take it with a grain of salt and a healthy dose of skepticism and see what happens. And, if it happens, when it becomes a reality, which, again, those timelines, even Elon himself admitted, have been optimistic in the past. So don't bank on 2026 or anytime this decade for any of this stuff, or ever. We'll see. But, especially the autonomous cars, very few people, there's been surveys that have been done, very few people are comfortable with the idea of even being in an autonomous car, and then one that doesn't have a steering wheel or pedals, and is also done by Tesla. It's pretty famous for not having a great full self-driving system. Even if this were actually available and ready to go sometime this decade, it's going to take even longer than that, I think, for people to be comfortable and, for this stuff to prove itself. We're still decades away from this stuff becoming mainstream, I think. Decades. So we'll see. And that, I think in the meantime, it'd just be nice to see Tesla's full self-driving system actually be safe and reliable, unlike, what they currently have with their current state of software. But anyway, so that is the update there from Tesla this week. But anyway, that's it as far as all the news this week. I just lastly wanted to thank all of you that are members of the Maran Motoring Club. So we didn't have any new members join this past week, but we did have a lot of people that were able to rejoin, thanks to Brian Harrington's very generous gifting in last week's live stream. So thanks so much, Brian, for your generosity. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure those members that are able to stay in the club here also appreciate it as well. For anyone else, though, that would like to join, become a member and get that priority answering, as well as all the other membership perks you get here from being a member, there's always join buttons here on the video page, on the channel page, and a link in the description. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Please leave a like and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.